We get a big update, a big story, a busy morning, a press conference. Charlotte City Council member Tiawana Brown and her two daughters were indicted today on federal charges for allegedly defrauding COVID-19 relief programs to obtain more than $124,000 in pandemic aid. Nate, you've been all over this story since the beginning. You were here on our 9 to 11 stream.
You've been up since like 6 a.m.
Yes.
Yeah, 5:30 today. Actually.
5:30.
Earlier than I wanted to be, but it just so happened that I'm glad I woke up early today because, wow, talk about an incredible development after a couple weeks of just madness at City Hall with the City of Charlotte. And this may just take the cake, the allegations against Tiawana Brown. This is a woman who made history, the first formerly incarcerated person to be elected to a city council position in Charlotte, is now facing fraud charges once again, this tied to pandemic relief loans she applied for and her daughters applied for, and the federal government said they essentially lied and made up things to receive that money.
Well, and she was very adamant in that press conference that she was responsible for more than $20,000. She paid it back. She said that over and over throughout the press conference. And she also said that this is politically motivated. Can you dig into that a little bit? Because we were talking about this in the morning meeting about the U.S. Attorney General. He inherited this case.
Yeah.
So that it puts.
I mean, look, we don't know who, first of all, tipped off the feds to this, or if they just discovered it on their own. So that we don't know. What we do know, though, is that the current U.S. attorney, who was just sworn in a couple months ago, says he inherited this case. So they've been investigating this for a while, and it just so happens that it's come to a head now. The indictment lays out a pretty clear case of the case that prosecutors are making. And I went through and looked through some federal PPP data today. That's that Payment Protection Program. Remember these loans that the government would forgive during the pandemic. And what I found is that her loan and her daughter's loans, they had multiple, each of them, were oddly similar in their applications. The timing, the address used, how much they received, what they were spending it on, they all aligned. Now, if you look at Tiawana Brown's Facebook page for her company, TC Collection, it's like a swimwear and clothing business that she says she started around 2020. At least that's what the Facebook page says. The connection would be, well, she was using that money for her business. That's what she told me earlier this morning. Because once I saw her news release that she was going to be holding a press conference, I said, what's going on? And we talked for a little bit around before 6:30 this morning. And she says, I use it for my business. I paid it back. She says she paid it back once she realized that it was being scrutinized. She doesn't understand why they're pursuing criminal charges against her. You know, if you listen to what she said in the news conference, she's saying she's innocent, that she didn't do anything illegal. But if you listen to the U.S. attorney who spoke to WFAE this morning, he will say that in the more than 30 cases of COVID fraud they've pursued over recent years, they're not going after people who make mistakes. They're going after people who knowingly lie or are fraudulent in getting federal money. So the suggestion that this was a mistake or an oversight, at least in other cases, that's not the kind of cases they're pursuing. They say if somebody makes a mistake, we're not going to, for the most part, pursue a criminal charge. We are going to try to recoup the money, but we're not going to try to send that person to prison. This is very clearly, they're headed towards that direction. They believe the three people, Tiawana and her daughters, came up with a scheme. They conspired to come up with a plan to essentially defraud the government.
Wow. And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, during the press conference, she did not answer questions about a portion of that money allegedly being spent on the birthday party. I know that was brought up as well.
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at the indictment, which is several pages long, again, it lays out the prosecution's case, and it says, number one, she spent some of this COVID money on a Louis Vuitton bag and other personal purchases. And then it goes on to say, shortly after receiving this loan, she threw a $15,000 birthday party for herself. Our Julie Kay has been looking into that and found some pictures of her on a throne. There's her with a horse-drawn carriage at this birthday party. She would not answer any questions about that. And her attorney also said that we're not going to try this case right here. Right? We're going to go to a courtroom and we'll try the specifics of the case. But she said if she had to make one point that I think she made over and over again, it's that once she was made aware that people were scrutinizing this loan, she paid her portion back, which she said it was a little more than $20,000. That doesn't really account for all of the applications that were not approved by the federal government that prosecutors say that she and her daughters concocted. It's going to be interesting to see when this goes to court, if it does go to trial, how this shakes out. I do think it's interesting, not surprising to me based on knowing her and having interviewed her multiple times, that she got out ahead of this today. She was defiant. She's a very confident council member. She's not one to just blend in with the wallpaper. Right. She's going to speak her mind. And if we find things that are problematic, she has generally been there to be held responsible and accountable. So that didn't surprise me. What did surprise me, though, is the idea that this might be politically motivated, especially in light of what's happened the last couple of weeks in Charlotte. There's a lot of politics happening right now. It's a small amount of money when you look at how much some of these cases are for, but we expect our public servants to be held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna create rules and laws and regulations, whether you're a city council member, a state lawmaker, a member of Congress, you're held to a higher standard. And so that's a part of this too.
That is exactly what Julie Kay and I were talking about this morning. Like, you're in this position, you're a politician, you represent constituents in your community. You have to answer those tough questions. I guess a question on my mind, I'm sure on a lot of folks' mind, what's next? What happens next?
Well, she has a court appearance tomorrow. Okay. That is slated for tomorrow morning. If you've never been to federal court, you can't bring a camera in. It's old school. You bring in a pad and a pen, and they bring the defendant in. Usually, it's unclear if she'll be there or if just her attorney will be there, and it'll be their first hearing where you will give a no guilty or a guilty plea. She told me she's going to plead not guilty, and then they'll start setting hearing dates down the road. If this does go to trial, which I do suspect it will, it's going to take a long time. They have to be given all of the evidence that prosecutors have found. They need to hand it over to them at some point. They need to have a chance to try to get the case dismissed, all very standard. But these other cases, some of them have resulted in plea deals and get resolved much faster. Because this is a lower amount, the U.S. Attorney suggested earlier today that the sentence could be lessened because of that. So maybe that's a reason to consider a plea deal. You paid the money back already, so there potentially may not be any reason to try to go after more money. But I also found this interesting. I was kind of doing some additional research on her, and at one point she had more than $3,000 worth of debt based on her previous incarceration, having to pay compensation for her crimes before. So it's this cycle that she has really worked hard in this community to try and break. She now finds herself back in it, and these are costly, these legal situations, and it's going to take attention away from whatever her main focuses have been. And when I talk to her, it's usually inclusion. It's trying to stop recidivism. It's trying to support women in our community and the district that she represents, District 3, Steel Creek, that surrounding area. Surprising story. When I saw the press release about the press conference early this morning, and a lot of details that still need to be hammered out. Nate Morabito is on it. And you will have an update for us in our evening newscast. Yeah, I'll be on at 5 and 6 tonight. Okay. We're kind of continuing to dig into this. We've already learned some new things. You can see at WCNC.com too. Okay. That article is growing longer and longer. The more and more information we get. And by the way, I texted with Tiawana a little while ago. She told me her daughters have nothing to say right now.
Right.
If you've noticed in that news conference that she held, she really was focused on herself.
Yes.
And kind of almost separating herself from her daughter's situation. And she's telling us that her daughters aren't going to comment.
Okay.
Gotcha. Well, Nate Morabito, thank you for your time, man. I know you're a busy man. Every time we have you in here, you're always working on something else. So, Nate, thank you for that update, man.
Appreciate you all.